Hello, I am Matt Williamson. How are you? Things are good here. We got a busy week in the Williamson household with my son's graduation and orientation at the University of Kentucky. I'll be going back and forth there, so if you're getting these at a weirder time, my apologies. But I have some news and notes that are mostly all Aaron Rodgers related here today, and mostly good, some bad, but more just getting to know him better. So we did this a little bit at this time last year. Actually, I did it a lot last year. I made the jokes that, wow, maybe the Steelers will actually throw touchdown passes in 2024 with Russell Wilson. He's got a long history of doing so. It was better with him, but it still wasn't exactly great, you know. So I kind of just did some digging. So since 2022, that's 51 regular season games. This is almost hard to believe. The Steelers have just 46 passing touchdowns in 51 games. That's the lowest in the NFL. Shocker. Okay. In Rodgers' last 51 games, he has thrown 91 touchdown cap passes compared to 46 for the Steelers during that stretch. That's kind of mind-boggling. Now, some of you, and I appreciate taking it to a new level, would say, okay, well, how far back, Rodgers has been injured a bunch. I don't need to go back to 2018 or 19 or whatever to get these numbers. Well, you really don't. I mean, again, that is 3 full seasons of 17 games for the Steelers. Well, last year, Rodgers played 17 games with the Jets. 2023, he played 1 game. And to be fair to him, he only played 3 snaps from what I remember in that game. So that's a game that is counting against him here. They really had no chance to produce stats whatsoever. His last year in Green Bay, he played 17. And his year before that, he played 16. So this is a 3-year compilation for the Steelers. It's a 4-year compilation for Rodgers because it just so happens that both add up to 51 because he played 1 game in 2023, 16 in 2021, 17 in 2022, and 17 in 2024. Pretty crazy. I mean, honestly, that is a massive discrepancy, to say the least, in passing touchdowns between where the Steelers were during that time and where Aaron Rodgers has been, even though he isn't the MVP Rodgers. Another thing that's promising with Rodgers. Now, I take this with not a grain of salt, or I wouldn't bring it up, but a new thing people are charting are incompletions due to receiver error. Basically saying the quarterback did his job, but the receiver in some way, shape, or form, the most obvious example would be drops, but maybe runs the wrong route or, whatever. What percentage of incompletions were due to the receiver's fault, not the quarterback fault? Now, again, I don't think these are set in stone forever and ever or gospel. But this past year, coincidentally, we were just talking about the Packers. They were the highest. 23% of the Packers' incompletions were deemed due to receiver error. The Steelers, that was 23%. The Steelers were right in the middle there. They were like at 17%, tied with Tampa, Carolina, Houston, Dallas, Tennessee. But the Jets, and remember, Rodgers played all 17 games, had the second most, 22%. Now, again, I don't think that's set in stone, but it gives you a darn close feel that a very high percentage of the incompletions by the Jets, Rodgers last year, were deemed receiver problems. I bet very few of them were Devontae Adams after the trade deadline. Some were Wilson. Wilson's a great player, but he's not a super strict route runner, nor is DK Metcalf, by the way. But really, I think it's the other guys. I mean, the Jets took a tight end in the second round. Their other receivers, the Malachi Corleys of the world, shouldn't even probably been on the field way too early. Lazard was there, but I'm not sure what percentage was his. I can't speak to that so much, but I do think that was a good thing about Rodgers is clearly he throws touchdowns, something we haven't seen around here much. And I'm sure he would have had more completions had his receivers helped him more, I guess is the bottom line. So according to this number, the Packers are the only team with more incompletions due to receiver error. BetOnline is the world's most trusting betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. With baseball season in full swing, BetOnline has more ways to stay in the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. We keep the dog days of summer rolling with the largest selection of odds on everything, with updated odds on MLB, UFC, and boxing to tennis and NFL futures. BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports betting information. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. Okay, so I think a lot of you know I get very involved with fantasy football for two reasons. Well, several reasons. First off, I like it. Secondly, people pay me to do it over the years. You know, I write articles, et cetera, et cetera. But thirdly, because they're pretty nerdly. You know, that rhymes. You can find a lot of these crazy stats that I dig up are through fantasy sites or fantasy experts, things of that nature. And something I found over the weekend is about pace, offensive pace, how fast you play. Now, in fantasy, that is super important. Remember, there's two lenses to look at this. My fantasy quarterback, running back, tight end, whatever, I want them to run a ton of plays. All I care about is fantasy points. I don't care if that team wins its football game. All I care is about fantasy points. So I want them to run a ton of plays. So some of these fantasy nerds, to their credit, look at offenses and systems and quarterbacks and play callers and say, these guys historically play very fast. They run a lot of plays. Or these guys historically play very slow. They don't run a lot of plays. Well, they're projecting the Steelers to play about as slow as humanly possible, which is fine. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't win games that way. I mean, again, if you're going to be mostly a running team and playing defense, that's fine. But it's a Rodgers trait. So again, here's some things I found from the article. So again, this is all from a fantasy lens, so they're going to paint this very negatively, which I understand, and it might be negative. So, and they're in tongue-in-cheek here. If you like how slowly the Aaron Rodgers experience moves, you're going to love its pace in an Arthur Smith offense. The only thing that kept a Rodgers offense afloat, and it rarely floats from a volume perspective these days, was an aggressive pass rate. So if you guys remember, the Jets threw the ball a ton last year. That leads to more plays, stoppage of clock, of course. Only Joe Burrow threw more passes than Rodgers a year ago, and only Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, and Daniel Jones produced fewer yards per pass. That's not great. The Jets ranked third in neutral rate. What is neutral rate? Or 30th. They ranked 30th in neutral rate, which just means how fast you snap the football when the conditions of the game are pretty neutral. If you're losing by 14 with 3 minutes left, obviously that's going to screw up the pace. But in neutral time, the game's within 7 points. It's close. It's early in the game. The Jets were 30th in pace. And that's a consistent trait of Rodgers' offense going far back into his Packer days. If you pair that with a plodding Smith handoff fetish, they call it, His offense ranked 26th and 32nd in pass rush over expectation the past 2 years. Smith's. As you know, they run the ball a ton. We have our leading candidate for lowest volume games in 2022 or 2025. I'm not reading very well today. Again, you don't want low volume games for fantasy, and they expect the Steelers to have a lot of low volume games. There is a chance, though, that Smith's offense, this might shock you. Smith's offense ranked 6th and 7th in neutral pace the past 2 years, while finishing 4th and 7th in no huddle rate. So even though he runs the ball a lot, Smith's offense, especially these past 2 years, one with Steelers, one with the Falcons, play pretty fast, and they don't huddle a ton. But will Rodgers speed up his slothful ways between plays at Smith prodding and infuse Pittsburgh's offense with play volume? From a fantasy perspective, that's hard to guess. Now, this all comes down to not Rodgers is old and slow and has a cane and a wheelchair to get to the line of scrimmage, or that he thinks slow. It's, as I've been telling you, what he wants to do as a quarterback is come to the line of scrimmage and kind of just not have a lot of motion and just wait out the defense and read what they're doing. Peyton Manning was the same way. It's a little bit of an older school way of doing things, don't get me wrong. But he doesn't like a lot of bells and whistles. He wants the defense to be as static and read their hand like a poker player as long into the down as possible. And thus, that leads to a slower pace. So even though he throws a lot, the Jets threw a ton, they still are a slower pace because of the way they throw the ball. And weirdly, Smith, even though he runs the ball a lot, they oddly have a pretty fast-paced for a run-based offense. How will that mesh? There's a chance it could be the slowest offense in the league. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean bad for our purposes. It means bad for fantasy purposes. You know, you're not going to have as many plays run. But I did find that interesting. So, all right, everyone, take care. Over and out.